It is now 11:05, and so I resume the hearing and turn then all the way back to matter 1, Greenbelt boundaries, and to consider section 8.
So yes, this is to deal with the specific representation that's been made by Mr. Calpin. Section 8 of the boundary is that part which deals essentially with York Racecourse and the stray immediately adjacent to it. Perhaps useful just to summarise the background to this. The original proposed boundary, which is what you will see on the proposals map, included the racecourse buildings, so the grandstand and the like, and a small triangular piece of green space. I deliberately say green space because it isn't a field, but I'll come back to it in a moment. Included all of that within the green belt. That was then subject to a modification quite early on in the process once the council revised its methodology. And the modification moved the greenbelt boundary such that that small triangular piece of green space and the bulk of the racecourse buildings, including the grandstand and the like, were excluded from the greenbelt. And the issue that Mr. Calpin has raised is that he prefers the original boundary, which included those buildings and that green space within the green belt. He does not agree with the change that has been made by the council. Now, the headline submission from the council is that change is necessary for the purposes of soundness to ensure that the green belt boundary accords with the revised methodology. That's the headline submission. We have explained our reasoning for that in CYC 59E, PDF page 175 through to 179. And I'm in your hands if you want to turn that up and I can talk you through it in very brief terms. No, I'm grateful, sir. PDF page 175 within that document. Now, sir, it's important to recognise that I can simply take the first page. This assesses against the purposes, identifies where those purposes are engaged. But that's identifying the land that's in the green belt and why it's engaged. So that really is sort of by way of background. What is actually an issue and in dispute is the land that's outside of the green belt. Now, Mr. Calpin, in his representation, essentially premises the argument on the fact that it is part of the green wedge. That's right. It's not part of the stray. It is part of the green wedge. But that in and of itself is not a reason to include it in the green belt. Rather, one has to assess against the purposes that we've set out in the methodology derived from national policy. And when that assessment is undertaken, the council's position is that that small green space, which appears on the information available to the council to actually be owned by the racecourse and used as part of the racecourse on event days. There's an underpass and a footpath and there's some car parking that takes place on that land, for example, isn't required within the Greenbelt in order to achieve those Greenbelt purposes. All the more so because of the location of those major buildings on the racecourse itself. In the Council's submission, it is obviously right to use those buildings and the road that runs adjacent to those buildings as the permanent defensible boundary, and to draw the line in the way that we have through the modification in 2018. The alternative would be to draw the boundary such that those buildings were included in the Greenbelt, but that, in our submission, would actually be at odds with the methodology and the purposes for which we're seeking to include land in the Greenbelt. They are substantial buildings. You will no doubt visit this part and see it if you haven't already, and simply that would be anomalous as against our methodology. The specific piece of land that Mr. Calpin's interested in, essentially, it is a consequence of that primary consideration. Once you've adjusted for those buildings, it's inevitable that that land is going to be on the outside of the Greenbelt. But it's also justified by reference to that land in any event. It's surrounded on all sides by built development. It is, as I've said, appears to be used. There's a very large footpath that runs across it. It's fenced, used as part of the racecourse. There is some parking, I'm instructed, that occurs on that as well. And in that context, having regard to those characteristics and how I've explained we've adjusted the line for the racecourse buildings itself, there's no reason to include that within the Greenbelt. The only other point that Mr. Calpin makes is the suggestion there's an inconsistency, because he says, well, look, if you look to the bottom of ST16, which is the allocation just next to the racecourse, this is easier to see on the proposals map, but you'll see it in due course. There is some part of the green wedge which isn't part of the stray that has been included in the Greenbelt. That's absolutely right, but there's no inconsistency because that part of the green wedge essentially continues straight into the stray and the other land that we've included to its north. It isn't characterised by the buildings on the racecourse, which it's not isolated, it's part and parcel, whereas this piece of land that Mr. Calpin is concerned about is isolated in the way that I've described to you. It's on that basis, sir, that we say that the modification is firstly necessary for the interest of soundness because of the revised methodology, and secondly, no amendment in the way that Mr. Calpin proposes is justified in these circumstances.
Sorry, can you just help me with, I foolishly didn't bring my proposals map downstairs.
Sir, can I lend you mine?
Yes, please. And if you could just...
The ST16 point.
Yeah.
So if you look at ST16, see its southern boundary, you will see immediately below that is more green wedge, and that is within the Greenbelt, even on our revised boundary. And Mr. Calpin says, well, aren't you being inconsistent? The answer is no, because as you will see, that green wedge runs straight through into the stray. It's not isolated in the way that that small triangular parcel is behind the back of the grandstand and between the three roads.
I understand, that's helpful.
Yeah, that's the point, sir.
Is if you could point me on the aerial photograph in 59E,
yeah.
where exactly the piece of land that Mr. Calpin is
Oh, yes, of
concerned
course.
with?
I'm sorry. I
No,
sort of took that for granted.
I was trying to work it out.
Yeah,
but
so do you see the top of the red line?
Yep.
And you see immediately to the east of that, there's a green space on a sort of triangular.
Yeah.
It's that green space that Mr. Calpin's concerned about.
Oh,
We think because essentially he has a flat that overlooks it, I think, is the genesis of this concern. But it is, as you'll see, surrounded on three sides, roads, fence, got the footpath through it, used as it on event days. and we say those characteristics don't justify its inclusion in the green belt by itself, but in any event, it's the buildings that are critical here. We've determined the boundary by reference to those major buildings that are part of the racecourse, and once you draw the line there, it's inevitable that this is going to be excluded.
I understand. I think we probably want to go and have a look at some point, but yeah, I'm clear.
I'm grateful. That's probably all I can do today then to assist you.
I think, Mr Henderson, you quite deliberately referred to that parcel as a green space. Is it a green space in the sense that it would be protected from development by other policies in the plan?
That's a good question, sir. It's not indicated as such on the proposal's map. I'm just recalling the GI policies. Just if you might bear with me one moment, sir. I'm just going to pull up the latest modifications to those. So if and insofar as it was to be protected, sir, it would be GI3. But I wouldn't want to give a definitive view as to whether that would be engaged here. Sir, I'm totally wrong. I apologise. So there was another modification I didn't have in front of me. CYC 113, PDF page 18. We've made this modification, but at the same time we've identified it as new open space associated with the racecourse. And once it's got that identification, then policy GI3 will kick in, and the first part of policy GI3 will therefore protect it. It's GI3 Roman numeral 1. So sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout way to saying yes. That's 13. Oh, hang on. 18. There we go, sorry. I probably read out the wrong number. You should see the horizontal hatching. $18, sir. Sorry. No, it definitely was me, I think, on this change. Oh, yeah. And you've got the horizontal hatching? Yeah. Essentially, sir, we say that's the end of the story.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. You said the end of the story, Mr Henderson. Is that to say that there's nothing else that the council wishes to say about this particular section?
Correct, sir.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that the council wants to say before I move to close the hearings?
Well, sir, I just wanted to recap essentially on where we stood on outstanding actions. I can do so very briefly, if that would assist.
Yeah, the mop up.
Indeed,
yeah,
sir.
I was going to close and then do the mop up, but that's fine. I mean, nobody's here anyway, so we could.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it in whatever order you prefer.
I'll happily do that first. That's fine.
From a mash up to a mop up. So let me just say, all I'm going to focus on now is what we've been calling homework items. Of course, through this phase, there have been a number of points that we've taken away, which I'm not going to go through now. We have taken those away. I've just been through the list with the team, and we'll reflect on those in due course. So in terms of what's outstanding, it's, I think, only 4 items. The first is to provide you with a hard copy of EXCYC 59 and the proposed modifications to the Greenbelt boundaries to assist you in your deliberations and site visits. That's in hand. The second issue is
just on that. How far in hand? We could do with it
pronto.
Yeah.
Bear with me. Next week, sir?
Yeah, next week would be ideal.
That's fine. And we'll liaise with Carol on the best way to get those to you. So I don't want to send them to Bristol for them never to make their way to you.
Please don't send it to Bristol. No. We will never ever see it. So but Carol can post that on to us. So just to help you out, we are hoping to be able to come and do some of our site visits the following week. So if we could have that.
Okay, understood. We will prioritise that
week to allow for posts. And if you weren't to scrimp on postage, but instead send it first class, that would be really helpful.
Yes, sir. All noted, and we'll take care of that. The next action point is the HRA for H59, the outstanding point. I don't think I need to say anything more than that's in hand. We've spoken to Natural England, we've had some feedback from them, and we will get our position to you, shared with the DIO in due course as quickly as we can. I don't think it would be necessary to go any further today on that.
Linked to that, when we discussed the matter the other day,
Mr. Bewley, I remember it well.
Mr. Bewley, yes. There was some discussions carrying on about the netting point and the number of residential units on the existing barracks site. I wonder if you got any further with that.
Yeah, we will get that to you as well, sir. It's an ongoing piece of work. Again, we've consulted Natural England. DIO have provided, I don't say they haven't, but they have provided evidence. The question is whether we are satisfied as to what that evidence shows, and at the minute we've got some concerns that are being worked through to establish what we can put into that blank text, whether it's 0 or something greater than that. But again, that'll go into the same note, sir, so I'm happy to deal with those together.
Yeah, we were wondering as well whether or not that had any bearing in relation to HRA.
So, insofar as it does, we'll pick it up in the updated HRA. But I think the short answer is probably not, because the whole point of the netting off approach is that it's an approach that will rule out adverse effects on integrity. So yes, we might have to screen it in, but once we've screened it in, if the evidence is good enough, underlined, then the netting off approach would allow adverse effects on integrity to be avoided. But I think that all I can really say to you today is we'll deal with that through the updated HRA, which will also sweep up some of the other points that Mr. Bewley made so that you have clarity on that. For example, well, I don't need to give you an example, but I'm just going to tell you we're dealing with it. If I do, it'll take longer. But yeah, that's in hand. So that was item 2. Item 3 is a short point, figure 5.2, dealing with density. We touched on this, I'm trying to recall, earlier last week. We need to update that so that it matches the policy text, remove the black lines, etc. That's all in hand. And then the 4th point is the retail policy paper on policy RW, which I think Mr. Linus dealt with at the start of this week. That again is in hand. But those are the 4 items that we have down as homework, unless there's anything from yourselves that we have omitted to deal with.
Not that we can immediately point to, but we'll triple lock check that.
Of course, and please just pass it on if there is something that I've overlooked. So that really, sir, is everything by way of outstanding actions. We've got the takeaway separately. Mr. Linus has already dealt with the timetable in. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but the first action is for us to produce those draft modifications in October, which will take into account those matters that we've just gone over there. And Mr. Linus has set out the rest of the process, the dialogue, and then the consultation and finalisation that will follow. So unless it assists you, I'm not going to repeat that conversation. Also from us, that's everything other than thanking you, both on behalf of the team, but also the council more broadly for your assistance and patience during this examination, and obviously to Carol as the programme officer. We are very grateful to her for her flexibility and incredibly long hours that she has worked to ensure that this has run smoothly over what is now many, many weeks. We are all personally and corporately grateful to all 3 of you.
Thank you very much for that rather sort of stolen up my thunder. But similarly, you know, we wanted to thank the council and its team for the hard work that you've undertaken, particularly during these examination hearings. We know how hard work they can be, and although there's no one here today to hear this, maybe for the benefit of those watching from home, we also wanted to thank everybody else that's participated in the hearings, and particularly those people who, unlike us, aren't paid to be here and have given up their own time to be involved in the process. So thank you all for that. And just finally, without wishing to sound too much like a night at the Oscars, we also wanted to just thank Carol as well. It's, you know, you've worked really, really hard, Carol, and yeah, our immense gratitude. That work's not yet over.
From myself too, thanks, Carol. I mean, it's they've been, you know, as well run a set of hearings as I've done, and you know, it just takes a load off our mind when, you know, you can rest assured that everything's arranged, everything's sorted out. It makes our job a lot easier. Really, really grateful. And I'd also like to pass my thanks on as a late arrival. So I've not been at this as long as you have, but yeah, thanks very much for the way the council have approached it. It's been very very proactive and helpful, and yep, it's well. I'm not saying that the deliberations will be straightforward, but certainly in terms of the hearings, we've been given all the information we need, I think. And I'd also like to reflect what Simon says about other participants too. They've been very, I think the word amiable was used by Councillor Waters yesterday, and yes, that sums it up perfectly. It's been, yeah, amiable. I think we can leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Carol.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, just one other thing before I formally close. So, yeah, when we get to this point, I just wanted to mention the fact check report. In this instance, so you're looking puzzled, Mr. Henderson.
No, so keep going, and if I don't follow, then...
Okay. When we submit our report to the council for fact-checking ahead of its formal submission, it would be very... This is a case where there are a lot of main modifications, and I know from experience of examinations where there have been a lot of main modifications, it can sometimes be difficult to, and time-consuming as well, frankly, to make sure that the fact-check report includes reference to all of the main modifications and that all of the main modifications are in the appendix, the schedule of main modifications that will append to our report. So if we could ask the Council to focus particularly on that as part of the fact-check process, that would be really helpful to us, just to make sure that nothing's gone awry.
No, absolutely, sir. Fully understand and appreciate why that needs to be dealt with in the way you've suggested, and we're happy to do that. And there are already steps in hand on our side to make sure we're on top of that issue as well.
Marvellous, very good. Okay, well, in which case, thank you very much. It's now bang on 11:30, and so I close these hearings. Thank you.